My first interaction with a Klansman, I wasn't seeking him out. I happened to come upon him, and I beat the daylights out of him. He was beating up a woman on a sidewalk. I did not know him. I was parking in a parking lot, and I saw a man straddled across a woman on the sidewalk, banging her head into the sidewalk and hitting her in the face.
Oh. And where was this and what time was this, Daryl? Like what
This was
year?
this was in Maryland back in the 1980s,
Wow. Okay.
and it was probably somewhere like around 1:30 in the morning.
Right.
There was an all night restaurant
So this
that I
was in your 20s.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and I was going to go get something to eat after a gig, and I came upon this. So I intervened. I did not know the guy was in the Klan, but it didn't matter to me, even if I had known. I did not like what I was seeing, and I was going to put a stop to it, and that's exactly what I did. And the guy went to jail that night. But that's a whole different story. But the to answer your question about as far as uh, a positive interaction or gleaning knowledge, I was playing in a band. In fact, in the same town where I first had the encounter with the guy that was beating up this woman. Um, I was playing in a band in an establishment called the Silver Dollar Lounge in a town called Frederick, Maryland.
Hmm.
Silver Dollar Lounge back then was not welcoming to black people.
Right.
Black people stayed out of there. There were no signs saying no blacks allowed, nothing like that. You could go in there, but you were not welcome.
There was a cultural of
Ex-
suppression. Right.
exactly. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, sometimes people have a little too much and they get a little, they lose their inhibitions and, fights break out and things like that. So I was in this place with this all white band. They'd played there before. And now they had a gig, and now I'm a member of the band, so I'm there. I knew about it before I'd ever gone there. I knew about it long before I even joined that band. But it was my first time in there. And on the break, somebody came up to me and put their arm around my shoulder from behind. I didn't know anybody in there other than the band. And so I'm turning around thinking, uh-oh, I better get ready here. And this guy had this white guy. He was a lot older than me. He had this big smile on his face and was very appreciative of our music, shook my hand. And then he made a statement I'll never forget. He said this was the first time he had ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis, the great rock and roll pianist from the 1950s, who just passed away a few years ago. And I was not offended by his statement, but I was shocked that given him being so much older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style, which Jerry Lee got from black people, black blues and boogie woogie piano players. So I proceeded to tell him that, and that I had gotten that same style from the same people. Well, he was incredulous. He did not believe me. He did not believe that Jerry Lee had learned anything from black people. I assured him that he did. I assured him that Jerry Lee Lewis was a very good friend of mine and had told me himself. He didn't believe that either. But he was so fascinated with me. He wanted me to come to his table and let him buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink alcohol. I never did. But I went back to his table. I let him buy me a cranberry juice. And he paid the waitress and he took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And then he made another statement, which dumbfounded me. He said, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. And I was dumbfounded. I was mystified. Like, how can this be? Because at that point in my life, I had sat down with thousands, tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a beverage, a meal, a conversation. How is it that this guy, maybe 15, 20 years older than me, had never sat down with a black guy before? So innocently, I wasn't trying to be facetious. I said, why? And he didn't answer me. He looked down at the tabletop, just quiet. And I said, why? Again. And his friend sitting next to him elbowed him and said, tell him, tell him, tell him. And I said, tell me. Because now my curiosity is just,
Right. Now you're like, I gotta know.
I got to know right now. So he looks at me and he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I started laughing,
Hmm.
genuinely laughing. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was like fun. Like, this guy's a joke. He's a comedian.
You're just like, "What the hell?"
What the hell? This guy's being a comedian. And I'm trying to justify why he's saying that in my head. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, he thinks I'm jerking him around about Jerry Lee Lewis learning things from black people and me knowing Jerry Lee. So he's going to jerk me around about being in the Klan or something. So while I'm laughing at his joke, he goes in his pocket, pulls out his wallet, ripples through it, and hands me his Klan membership card. I recognize the Klan emblem, on the card, and I stopped laughing. This card was for real, and now I'm questioning myself in my mind, like, what the heck am I doing sitting at a table with a Klansman, right?
Mhm.
And I recall in my mind, I recall the experience I had beating up the guy, because the guy that I beat up, like I said, I didn't know he was a Klansman. Like I said, it didn't matter to me, right, who he was or what he was.
Right.
I helped the lady out after I got him off of her, and I put some ice on her head and all that kind of stuff. And she's the one who told me he was in the Klan. He was also a member of the fire department.
Wow.
He was a fireman. So anyway, I got all that going through my head, but this guy did not fit the personality of the other Klansmen. So that's why it's important not to paint anybody with a broad brush. All right.
Mm.
I'm not saying I approve of the Ku Klux Klan by any means. All right. Even though this guy was very nice to me, bought me a drink, wanted to talk to me, liked my piano playing, whatever. That does not mean that I approve of his ideology. All
Mhm.
right. But he was very friendly, very forthcoming. We talked about various things, music and the
Right.
Klan and whatever else. And so he gave me his number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to return. I would call him every 6 weeks when the band had a gig there. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. I'd meet some of them. Some of them did not want to meet me, which is fine. They'd leave the table when they saw me coming on the break, and others would hang and talk to me. So everybody's different, and they danced to our music. And then at the end of that year, I didn't realize um, what was happening. He was just a guy in the Klan. All right. And a few, at the end of that year, I quit that band and I went back to playing rock and roll and different genres of music. And I'd forgotten about him. I had no interest in going to Frederick to hang out with the Ku Klux Klan, on my day off or something. But then it dawned,
That makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. But now it doesn't make sense
That's the one part of the story that I think makes sense to most listeners until now.
until now. Right. But
Yeah.
see, hopefully this will make more sense. So a few years later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question
Mm.
that has been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap and you didn't even realize it. The Klansman would have the answer to that question. You need to get a hold of that guy, get back in contact with him, get him to fix you up with the Klan leader for Maryland. Interview that guy, go up north, interview other Klan members and leaders, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West,
Hmm.
interview these people, and write a book. Because every book that I had was written by white authors, except for two. These two black guys detail how each one escaped a lynching in the 1930s and the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face, having in person interviews with their potential lynchers. That's what I want to do. I want to become the first black author to write an in person, face to face book on the Klan by interviewing these people who would potentially lynch me. No, I do not have a death wish. I want to get it right from the horse's mouth.
Right.
How can you hate me when you don't even know me? So that's how that started. And I got back in contact with that guy. He was very reluctant to set me up with the Klan leader. He was fearful for my safety as well as his own. By the time I got back in contact with him, a few years after the idea dawned on me, he was no longer in the Klan.
Hmm.
But he still was fearful of bringing a black man to this Klan leader. So I convinced him to give me the Klan leader's address and phone number, and I said I will handle it.
Hmm.
And he reluctantly gave it to me on the condition that I not tell the Klan leader where I got his personal information. So
Right.
that's how that proceeded.
So So that then led to a whole series of conversations that you had with members of the KKK.
Yes,
Um, Tell us how you go about having that conversation. There's something that I've read a lot in your work where you talk about people's reality versus people's perception, and that
yes,
you can't challenge people's reality because that fundamentally causes them to raise a wall. If you
yes.
actually want to get through to people, you have to challenge and create an alternate perception. So that's one thing that I've picked up on. But from your standpoint, how do you actually go about those conversations? And what are some skills and takeaways that everyday people can have? Not necessarily because they're going to talk to members of KKK, but maybe they're going to talk to their crazy uncle at Thanksgiving.
Sure. Okay. And these principles and tactics or tools, that I employ are things that I've picked up and I've looked at myself. Like why, okay, first of all, when you see my name in the media, it will say something to the effect of black musician converts X number of white supremacists or KKK or whatever, right? Um, no, that is an incorrect statement.
Mm,
I did not convert anybody, not 200, not two, not even one. I am the impetus for over 200 white supremacists, whether they're Klan members or neo
mm,
Nazis or just the racists next door, to convert themselves. All right.
mm.
Now,
That's a really important frame because it
yes,
means that you didn't go in with the agenda of conversion.
exactly. My agenda was very narrow. All I want to know is I'm not here to be your friend. I'm not here to tell you to get out of the Klan because it's wrong. I'm not here to say, give me your robe. You should not be in this organization. I'm just here to ask you a question. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? Help me understand what is going through your head, and I will thank you for your time, and we will go our separate ways.